I was 15 years old when it happened. We lived in a two-story house at the end of a quiet suburban street. It wasn't old enough to be considered historic, but it wasn't new either. Built sometime in the early 80s. The kind of house that made small noises at night. Wood settling, pipes ticking, the faint pop of cooling walls after a long day. My bedroom was at the far end of the second-floor hallway. Inside my closet, mounted into the ceiling, was a small square hatch that led directly into the attic. It was about 2 feet wide, painted white like the rest of the ceiling, but the edges were chipped enough to reveal the wood underneath. There was a small metal ring attached to it so you could pull it down. I never liked that hatch. Even as a kid, I avoided looking at it when my closet light was off, and something about knowing there was a dark, hollow space above my ceiling bothered me more than it should have. My dog Mandy slept in my room every night. She was a beagle pointer mix, sweet, gentle, and incredibly loyal. She had never shown aggression toward anyone, not even strangers. If someone broke into our house, I used to joke that she'd probably roll over for belly rubs. That's why what happened that night scared me so badly. It was around 11:40 p.m. I had just finished brushing my teeth and was scrolling on my phone in bed. The house was quiet. My parents' room was down the hall. My younger brother's room was across from mine. Mandy was curled up on her dog bed near my closet. That's when I heard it. A low, steady growl. At first, I thought it was part of something I was watching. I lowered my phone volume. The growling continued. I looked over. Mandy was still lying down, but her head was raised. Her ears were stiff. Her eyes were fixed on something. The closet. I let out a small laugh. "What is it, Mandy?" She didn't move. Her growl deepened. It wasn't loud. It wasn't frantic. It was controlled. Warning. I sat up in bed. "Do you need to go out?" I asked. Normally, if she needed to go outside, she'd jump up immediately. She didn't. Her eyes never left the closet. I glanced at the closet doors. They were closed. The light inside was off. Everything looked normal. "Relax," I muttered. I turned my lamp off and tried to sleep. For the next hour, every time the house fell completely silent. She growled again. Short bursts, low, focused. Each time I checked the closet. Nothing. Eventually I drifted off. I woke up suddenly. It was completely dark. My digital clock read 2:17 a.m. For a moment, I didn't know what had woken me. Then I heard it. The growling again. But this time it wasn't low. It was louder, angrier. I pushed myself up on my elbows and looked across the room. Mandy wasn't on her bed anymore. She was standing in the center of my room, rigid. Her body pointed toward the closet. Her head tilted slightly upward. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. She wasn't looking at the closet doors. She was looking higher. At the attic hatch. My throat went dry. The metal ring attached to the hatch was slightly swaying. Just barely. I told myself it was my imagination. I reached over and turned on my bedside lamp. Light filled the room. The growling didn't stop. Mandy took a slow step forward. I forced myself out of bed. "Okay," I whispered, though mostly to calm myself. "Let's just check." I walked to the closet and opened the sliding doors. Nothing inside looked disturbed. Clothes hung normally. Shoes lined the floor. But when I stepped inside and looked up, my heart nearly stopped. The attic hatch was slightly open, not wide, just cracked, about an inch. Darkness spilled through the thin opening. I stood there, frozen. I was absolutely certain it had been closed before. We never went into the attic, and even if someone had, why wouldn't they close it all the way? "Mandy," I whispered. She stepped into the closet behind me, and then she barked. Loud, explosive, right at the ceiling. That was enough for me. I ran out of my room and sprinted down the hall to my parents' bedroom. I didn't even knock. I burst inside and flipped their light on. "What?" My dad snapped, jolting awake. "There's someone in my attic," I said. Even as I said it, it sounded insane. My dad rubbed his face. "What are you talking about?" "Mandy's been growling at my closet all night. The attic door is open." He sighed, but then he heard it. Mandy barking from down the hall. Not playful, not confused, territorial. My dad stood up. He was a big guy, former high school linebacker, not easily scared. He didn't grab a weapon. That part still bothers me. We walked back toward my room. The barking stopped the second we reached the doorway. Silence. That kind of silence that feels heavy. My dad stepped into the closet. He didn't hesitate. He reached up and pushed the hatch open fully. The wooden panel swung upward. Dust fell from the edges. Darkness stared back at us. He grabbed a flashlight from the hallway drawer and climbed up into the attic. I stood, frozen, in my room. Mandy stood beside me, staring upward again. A few seconds passed. Then I heard shifting. Boxes, scraping, footsteps, not just my dad's. Another set. He yelled, not words, just a raw, shocked yell. Something crashed. Glass shattered. The entire ceiling above me shook as something heavy moved violently across the attic floor. "Dad!" I shouted. Then I saw it. A hand. Dropping down through the attic opening, followed by a leg, then a body. A man dropped down into my closet. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, dirty clothes, scruffy beard, and in his hand, a hammer. He locked eyes with me. I couldn't move. Time felt frozen. Then Mandy launched forward. She clamped onto his forearm. Hard. He screamed. The hammer clattered to the floor. He tried shaking her off, slamming his arm into the closet frame. She didn't let go. My dad dropped down from the attic right behind him and tackled him to the ground. They crashed into my dresser. Wood splintered. My dad pinned him face down while shouting for my mom to call 911. I just stood there, shaking, watching. The man kept screaming. Not words, just animal panic. Police arrived within minutes. They dragged him out in handcuffs. As they walked him past me, he turned his head and stared. Not angry, not scared, just empty. Later, we found out he had been living in our attic for at least 2 days. There were food wrappers up there, water bottles, a sleeping bag. He had been watching us, listening, waiting. The police told us the hammer likely wasn't for stealing. It was for something worse. If Mandy hadn't growled, if she hadn't barked, if she hadn't bitten him when she did, I don't think my dad would have made it out of that attic the same way, and I don't think I would be telling this story. The police searched the attic for nearly an hour. At first, my dad wouldn't let me see anything. He kept telling me to stay downstairs with my mom and brother, but I couldn't sit still. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mandy stayed glued to my side, pacing, still restless. Something about the house felt different. Violated, like the walls weren't ours anymore. Eventually, one of the officers came down from the attic and spoke quietly with my parents in the kitchen. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught pieces. Been up there at least 48 hours. Food wrappers. Insulation disturbed. Looks like he carved out a space between the beams. That last part stuck with me. Carved out a space. He hadn't just hidden, he had settled in. After the police took him away, my dad finally let me see. I wish he hadn't. The attic pull-down ladder was extended now. The wooden panels creaked as we climbed. My dad went first. I followed a few steps behind, the flashlight beam trembling in his hand. The attic smelled wrong. Not just dust and old insulation. It smelled like sweat, stale air, human. There was a cleared-out area near the center, where insulation had been pushed aside into messy piles. A small nest had been made between 2 wooden support beams. There was a thin sleeping bag, empty plastic water bottles, protein bar wrappers. And something else. Small drilled holes. Tiny holes in the wood that lined up with the ceiling drywall. My dad crouched down and shined the light through one of them. The beam came through the ceiling of my room, right above my bed. I felt my stomach drop. There were 3 holes total. One above my bed, one above my door, and one above the hallway. He had been watching, not guessing, not listening only. Watching. I backed away and almost tripped over something behind me. It was a small notebook, black cover, worn. The officer picked it up using gloves. He flipped it open. I saw my name, written over and over. Different handwriting pressure. Some light. Some pressed so hard the pen nearly tore the page. My name. Then underneath it, 2:17 a.m. on phone. 11:43 p.m. lights off. Parents argue 9:12 p.m. It wasn't random. It was a log. When he had been timing us, tracking us, learning patterns, when we slept, when we left, when the house was quiet. The officer closed the notebook without saying anything more. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a break-in and started feeling targeted. We didn't sleep in the house that night or the next. We stayed at my aunt's place across town while the police investigated further. They told my parents the man had a record: trespassing, voyeurism, breaking and entering. He didn't live nearby. They still don't know how long he'd been watching the house before entering. The worst part? There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no shattered windows, nothing. Which meant one thing. He had gotten in quietly, while we were home. At some point he had walked through our living room, past our kitchen, up our stairs, and into my closet. And we never heard him. A few days later, my dad installed new locks, security cameras, motion lights outside. He sealed the attic hatch with screws and brackets. But even after that, something in me had changed. I couldn't sleep in my room anymore. Every small noise felt intentional. Every creak felt like footsteps. And Mandy. She wasn't the same either. She started sleeping pressed directly against my bedroom door. Not on her bed, not near the closet, right at the door, like she was guarding it. One night, about a week after the arrest, I woke up again. 2:17 a.m. Exactly the same time. My room was silent. Too silent. Then Mandy slowly lifted her head and growled. My blood ran cold. She wasn't looking at the closet this time. She was looking at the ceiling. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The attic hatch was sealed shut now, screwed tight. There was no way anyone could open it from above. The growling grew deeper, low, threatening. Then, a faint sound, above us. Not footsteps, not shifting boxes, scratching, slow, deliberate, like something dragging lightly across the wood. My dad had checked the attic himself before sealing it. The police had cleared it completely. There was no one up there. There couldn't be. The scratching stopped. Silence filled the room again. Mandy continued staring upward for a full minute. Then she slowly lowered her head. But she didn't relax. Neither did I. The next morning, my dad checked the attic again. Nothing. No footprints in the insulation. No moved boxes. No sign of entry. He told me it was probably an animal. A squirrel. Raccoon. Something like that. Maybe. But animals don't keep logs. Animals don't write names. Animals don't memorize sleep schedules. And animals don't get arrested. We eventually moved out of that house 3 months later. My parents told everyone it was because my dad got a better job opportunity. But I know the truth. None of us ever felt safe there again, especially not at 2:17 in the morning. Even now, years later, if I wake up around that time, I don't look at the ceiling. I don't want to know if something might be staring back. And sometimes when my current dog growls in the middle of the night, I remember the holes above my bed, and I wonder, how long had he really been up there before Mandy finally noticed? Next, good. Now we go darker. We escalate the psychological tension and uncover something worse. We thought it was over. That's what everyone kept telling us. He's in custody. You're safe now. It was just a disturbed man. But something about that explanation never sat right with me. Because of one detail, the timeline. The police originally told us he had likely been in the attic for 48 hours, 2 days. But that didn't match something I remembered. 3 weeks before he was caught, I had woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of something very light. A soft tap, like a fingernail against wood. I had ignored it, blamed the house settling. Then there was the smell. About a week before everything happened, I remember walking into my room after school and thinking it smelled off. Not strong, not obvious, just different, stale. I opened my window for a while and forgot about it. And Mandy, she had started acting strange long before that night. Random growling toward the ceiling, refusing to enter my room sometimes unless I went in first. At the time, I laughed it off. Looking back, I think she knew, long before I did. 2 weeks after the arrest, my dad received a call from the detective assigned to the case. The man wasn't talking much, but they had identified him. His name was Daniel Kessler, 34 years old. No fixed address. Arrested twice before for breaking into homes and hiding inside them while families were present. Not stealing, not immediately attacking, just staying, watching, waiting. That was his pattern. He would observe a house for weeks, learn routines, find entry points, then slip inside when the opportunity presented itself. Sometimes he would stay in basements, sometimes crawl spaces, sometimes attics. The detective said something that made my dad go silent. In one of his previous arrests, he wasn't found until 6 days later. 6 days, living above someone, listening to them breathe, watching them sleep. And then the detective added one more detail. In that case, he eventually came down. I didn't hear the rest of the conversation, but I didn't need to. We went back to the house one last time before officially selling it. Most of the furniture was gone. The rooms echoed now. Empty houses feel colder, even in daylight. I went upstairs alone. I don't know why. Maybe I needed closure. My closet doors were removed. The attic hatch was still sealed with screws. I stared at it for a long time. Then something caught my eye. Very faint. Near the upper corner of my wall, a tiny dark circle. I stepped closer. It wasn't a stain. It wasn't a shadow. It was a filled-in hole. Smaller than the others, patched over, poorly. I ran my finger across it. The paint felt slightly rough there. I called my dad upstairs. He stared at it for a few seconds. Then he went into the attic. A few minutes later, he came down, face pale. There were 4 holes, he said quietly. Not 3, 4. The police only documented 3. The 4th one had been covered from below, from inside my room, which meant he had come down, at least once, before he was caught. That realization changed everything. Every memory replayed differently after that. The night I thought I heard breathing, but assumed it was my fan. The time my bedroom door was slightly more open than I remembered leaving it. The random cold draft I felt one evening while doing homework. He hadn't just been above me. He had been in my room, standing there, while I slept. The thought made me physically sick. My dad never told my mom about the 4th hole. I overheard him on the phone later, arguing with the detective. They had no proof of when it was made. No fingerprints left in the room. Nothing concrete, just circumstantial fear. But I knew. Mandy knew. That's why she never barked at the closet doors directly. She barked upward, because that's where he returned to, after coming down. Months later, during the court hearing, we learned one final detail. When they searched Daniel's backpack, they found a camera, Small, handheld. The memory card had been removed. They never recovered it. I try not to think about what was on that card. But sometimes when I wake up randomly in the middle of the night, I still check the ceiling first. Not because I think someone is there, but because once there was. And the scariest part of this entire thing isn't that a stranger lived in our attic. It's this. If Mandy hadn't growled that night, he might have eventually decided to come down again. And next time, he wouldn't have needed the hammer to build anything. He would have used it. We moved 3 months later. Different neighborhood, different layout. No attic access in my room. My parents tried to make it feel like a fresh start. New paint, new furniture, security system installed before we even unpacked. They kept saying, "It's over." But trauma doesn't end just because your address changes. For the first few weeks, things were quiet. I started sleeping better. Mandy seemed calmer, too. She explored the new house carefully at first, sniffing every corner like she was scanning for something. After a few days, she relaxed, or at least I thought she did. The first strange thing happened about a month after we moved in. It was 1:52 a.m., not 2:17, but close enough to make my chest tighten when I checked the clock. I woke up because Mandy shifted suddenly on the floor beside my bed, not growling, just sitting upright, still, listening. The room was dark except for a faint blue glow from the street light outside. I held my breath. The house was quiet. No scratching, no footsteps, nothing. After about 30 seconds, she laid back down. I told myself it was nothing. Dogs hear things we don't. Wind, pipes, small animals outside. I went back to sleep. 3 nights later, it happened again. This time she growled. Low, controlled, the exact same growl from the old house. The one that wasn't playful, the one that meant warning. I sat up immediately. She wasn't looking at the ceiling. There was no attic. She was staring at my bedroom door. The door was closed, locked. The hallway light outside was off. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Nothing moved. The growling continued, slow, deliberate. Then, a soft sound from the hallway. A single floorboard creak. My blood went cold. Our new house didn't creak like the old one. It was newer, solid. I whispered, "Dad." No response. Mandy's growl deepened. Another creak. Closer. I stood up and unlocked the door quickly, yanking it open. The hallway was empty. Pitch black. My parents' bedroom door was shut. My brother's door was shut. No movement, no shadows. I turned on the hallway light. Still nothing. My dad stepped out of his room seconds later. I confused and half asleep. "What's going on?" "I heard something," I said. He checked the entire house. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows secure. Security system still armed. No alerts. He told me it was probably the house settling. Again. But Mandy didn't settle. She refused to sleep after that. She stayed awake, staring at the doorway until morning. Over the next week, small things began happening. Subtle, almost deniable. My bedroom door would be slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it. My desk chair angled differently than I left it. Once, my closet light was on when I came home from school. I started questioning myself. Was I distracted, forgetting small details? Or was I just paranoid because of what happened before? Trauma can make your brain see patterns where none exist. That's what I kept telling myself. Until the night everything escalated. It was exactly 2:17 a.m. I remember because I didn't wake up naturally. My phone buzzed loudly on my nightstand. Unknown number. No caller ID. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. I picked up. Silence. Then breathing. Slow. Close to the microphone. My entire body locked up. "Hello," I whispered. The breathing continued for about 5 seconds. Then the line disconnected. I stared at my phone screen. No voicemail. No text. just the missed call. Mandy was standing now, not growling, but stiff, alert, facing the door again. I got up and walked into the hallway. My dad's door was open slightly this time. He was standing there already, phone in his hand. "Did you get a call?" he asked quietly. My stomach dropped. "Yes," he nodded once. "So did I." Unknown number, same time, same silence. Just breathing. We called the police immediately. They traced nothing. Blocked line, untraceable. Could have been a prank, could have been random. But here's the part that made it impossible to dismiss. 2 days later, we got confirmation. Daniel Kessler had made bail. Someone posted it for him. He was out. The restraining order was filed immediately. Security system upgraded. Cameras installed inside and outside the house. Police increased patrols in our area. But none of that changed the feeling that we were being watched again. The final incident happened a week later. Broad daylight, 3 p.m. I was home alone after school. Mandy was in the living room with me. She suddenly stood up and walked to the front window. No barking, no growling, just staring. I joined her. Across the street, parked along the curb, was a dark sedan. On engine off. Windows tinted. It could have been anyone, a delivery driver, a neighbor's guest. But it had been there the day before, too. And the day before that, I stepped outside. The moment I did, the engine started. The car pulled away slowly. As it passed me, the driver's side window lowered, just slightly. Not enough to see the whole face, but enough. Scruffy beard, empty eyes. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just looked at me, and kept driving. Mandy began barking violently behind me. The police were called again, but by the time they searched the area, the car was gone. They couldn't prove it was him. No plates captured clearly on camera, no direct evidence, but deep down, I knew. He hadn't chosen our house randomly, and he hadn't forgotten us. The restraining order meant nothing if he never stepped on our property. Watching from a distance wasn't illegal. Following wasn't illegal. Not until something happened. That's what the officer told my dad. Call us if he approaches again. If. That word stuck with me. Because it meant they were waiting for him to make the first move. And sometimes, I still wake up at 2:17 a.m. No phone call anymore. No car outside. No footsteps. Just silence. But Mandy, even years later before she passed, whenever she heard something unusual at night, she didn't look at the ceiling. She didn't look at the door. She looked at me, like she was ready, in case he ever decided to come down again. After the car incident, things went quiet. Too quiet. No more unknown calls, no more parked sedans, no movement on the cameras. For nearly 2 months, nothing happened. Gradually, the tension in the house faded. Then my mom stopped checking the security feed every hour. My dad stopped double-checking every window before bed. I almost convinced myself that Daniel Kessler had moved on. Maybe he realized we were too alert now, too prepared. Maybe he found another house. That thought didn't comfort me. It just meant someone else might be living under a ceiling they thought was empty. Then October came. Cold nights, early sunsets, longer shadows. On October 14th, I stayed home from school with a fever. Nothing serious, just enough to keep me in bed. My parents went to work. My brother went to school. It was just me and Mandy. Around noon, I woke up to the sound of her nails clicking across my bedroom floor. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't barking. She was pacing, back and forth, between my door and my window. I sat up slowly. "Mandy," I said softly, but she stopped pacing and growled, not at the door, not at the hallway, at the window. The blinds were half closed. Sunlight filtered through in thin lines. I walked over and gently pulled one blind aside. Across the street, parked, the same dark sedan. Engine off, driver inside, watching. My throat tightened. I stepped back immediately, so he couldn't see me clearly. Mandy began barking now, loud, aggressive. The driver didn't move, didn't flinch. He just sat there. I grabbed my phone and called my dad first, then the police. By the time officers arrived 10 minutes later, the car was gone. Again, no plates, no evidence, just my word, and a dog barking at empty space. That night, my dad didn't go to bed. He sat in the living room with the lights off, watching through the front window. Mandy stayed beside him, around 1:40 a.m. My dad heard something outside. Not a car, not footsteps, just a faint metallic sound, like someone touching the gate latch. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't move toward the door. He just watched, and then he saw him, standing near the edge of our driveway, not hiding, not rushing, just standing there. Daniel. Even from that distance, my dad recognized him. The same hollow expression, the same still posture, like he was deciding something. Mandy began growling beside my dad. Low. Dangerous. Daniel tilted his head slightly, almost curious. Then he took one slow step forward. That was enough. My dad stood up abruptly and turned on every light in the house. At the same time, he shouted loud enough to wake the entire block. "I see you!" Daniel froze. For a split second, their eyes locked through the window. Then Daniel stepped backward, turned, and walked away into the darkness. Not running, just walking, like he knew this wasn't over. Police arrived within minutes. This time, security cameras captured him clearly. Face visible, trespassing, violation of restraining order. They found him 3 streets over. He didn't resist arrest, didn't say a word, just stared at the ground while they handcuffed him. We later found out something that still keeps me up at night. When they searched him, he had tools in his backpack. Gloves, a small pry bar, and duct tape. He hadn't come to watch. He had come to act. The detective was blunt this time. If your father hadn't confronted him when he did, he was likely testing how quickly he could approach without triggering alarms. Testing, just like before. Learning patterns, waiting. But this time, he didn't get the chance. Because Mandy growled, because my dad looked outside, because we didn't ignore the feeling. Daniel Kessler didn't make bail again. He's serving time now. Years, maybe more if other cases stick. We moved again after that. Not because we had to, but because none of us wanted to see that driveway anymore. Mandy passed away 3 years later. Old age, peacefully. The night before she died, she did something strange. She woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. I know because I checked the clock. She didn't growl, she didn't bark. She just walked over to my bedroom door, sat down in front of it, and stared for almost a full minute. Then she came back to my bed and laid her head on my chest, like she was making sure, like she was doing one last check. I don't know if she remembered. I don't know if dogs hold on to things like we do. But I know this. If she hadn't growled that first night, if she hadn't bitten him, if she hadn't kept reacting every time he came close, I probably wouldn't be here telling this story. People say dogs are loyal, protective, brave. But sometimes, they're the only reason you realize you were never alone. And sometimes, they're the only thing standing between you and the man above your ceiling.